big agriculture has the biggest influence over the USDA, and for good reason. If you go back and read the law that was passed and Abraham Lincoln signed into law that created the United States Department of Agriculture, it was set up as an advocacy organization for farmers. And it was for good reason. You know, we today tend to forget that it wasn't all that long ago that the United States really had a lot of food insecurity. At the turn of the century, between the 1800s and 1900s, you had huge swaths of the population who were underfed. And this was a lot because farming is hard work and it's sometimes unpredictable. Weather, crop failures, all kinds of things can happen. So the USDA was formed because it was decided that the government, because of food being such an important thing to survival, just couldn't afford for the volatility of circumstance, you know, and happenstance to affect our food availability. So after the USDA was formed, if you looked at the early years, you would have given it a thumbs up because what they were doing was working on irrigation, teaching farmers to till the soil, not just the top layer, but for a long time farmers would just destroy some acreage and then they'd just go next door and plant some more acreage because we used to have a whole lot of country and it seemed unlimited at the time that you could do this. Well, you couldn't do it unlimited. So there was a lot of advancement in terms of irrigation and how to till the soil and the proper use of safe fertilizers and that sort of thing. And then things took a dark turn, where the partnership between farmers and the farming industry and the USDA became a lot more one of influence. And there's too much of that going on in government. I don't think we should just pick on the farmers and the USDA. And I also think we have to make sure we look at the system promotes the bad behavior. We have to change the system. It's not the people who are doing it. But be that as it may, right now farmers have a great deal of influence over the USDA, and this is complicating things because the USDA over 100 years ago took it upon itself to become involved in the development of guidelines for diets for Americans. So, you know, all the pyramids and the food plates and all that sort of thing, the USDA is involved in this. And so the USDA is in an intractable position. You can't solve this. If they were ever to tell Americans how to eat, they would have to tell them to eat less of some of the things produced by the farmers, and those are the real constituents that are served by the USDA. So we should get rid of that conflict of interest. And then we should further get rid of the partnerships like the checkoff programs that are administered by the USDA. And I don't know if you know about those, but the dairy checkoff program, all the farmers who produce dairy products of any type pay a certain fee per pound. And it goes into a fund, and it's administered by the USDA, and taxpayer dollars are involved in this too, to promote things like eating more dairy products. And don't you find this ironic? The federal government is over here promoting the consumption of more dairy products, partnering with fast food restaurants to come up with recipes so we can put cheese on the crust of the pizza and add extra cheese to the sandwiches so we can have more disease, which then the government is charged with helping, you know, with Medicaid, Medicare, to resolve the health issues that result from all that increased dairy. And so we should just get rid of all of that and go back to the idea that the USDA could help farmers to be better farmers and work on technology and things of that nature. Well, the government's job is not to keep people healthy. And I think that's another problem too. We keep charging the government with doing more and more things that the government's not supposed to do. If you take a look at the federal government is supposed to be involved in things like defense of the country, infrastructure, keeping people safe. Again, I read the law that formed the USDA. I don't have any objections to it. And if you look at the time in which it was passed, there were a lot of people that benefited because starvation was a problem in our country. So the government is supposed to do things that people can't do for themselves. And back in the 1800s, when this was done, you had a bunch of family farms. Nobody was using technology, and none of these people had enough money to make things better for themselves. And they were so busy growing food that they didn't have time to say, we should take a little bit of every day and go out and explore irrigation, right? So that's something the government can do. But when we get the government involved in things like telling people what to eat and how to stay healthy, and I think there are better ways to do it. And I'm seeing the government in all areas of health becoming more and more involved. It's part of the nanny state, which I have an objection to on a number of different levels. But for this discussion, we'll just stick to the ones about health. You know, one of the saddest things that I've seen is that, I don't like to see people being taken advantage of. Let me back up and say that. I think a lot of people want to help with this health crisis. And one of the seemingly good ways to do that is to become involved with disease groups. So the American Diabetes Association, there are the National Association, there are all, well, I can't remember the name of it, but there are a bunch of them that are involved in mental health. CHAD is one that's involved with people who have attention deficit disorder. So chronic disease, mental health, there's a disease group for almost everything, breast cancer survivors, etc. So people get involved in these organizations and they raise money for them, and we got people wearing pink ribbons and racing for the cure and all that sort of thing. The dark side of these organizations is that they're funded by drug and food companies. And what happens is even celebrities become unwitting pawns in the promotion of drugs, food, procedures. And some of the perverse relationships that happen, this would be fodder for Saturday Night Live if the consequences were not so serious. I remember it was about 18 months of period of time when the health tip of the day on the website for the American Diabetes Association was sponsored by Eskimo pie. Now, what kind of a message does that send to diabetics? You should eat more Eskimo pie? It's insane. And so these organizations, in my opinion, should find some way to be self-supporting without taking so much money from these groups, which clearly has an influence on what they say and the stances that they take. And by the way, there are a lot of good people working in these organizations. I put it this way. I think what we have is a lot of good apples in bad barrels. Okay, so we've got to change the barrel so that the good apples can do good work. We've all been part of the machine in one way or another, either by being unwitting participants, being the receiving end, buying the bad food and receiving the ineffective or dangerous medical treatment and that sort of thing. So we've all been part of it. And what we have to do is just massive amounts of education. And the difficulty in some of this, when you look at these nonprofits, is that people become very defensive. It's very difficult for a person to say, I was deceived or taken advantage of. I know I had a lot of those feelings when I first started down this path. We all want to think we're smart and savvy, right? And so when you start to understand I've been lied to, and not only was I lied to, but I behaved in a way that is exactly what they wanted me to do. I used to eat dairy products. I used to eat a lot of things that are advertised on TV. I took a lot of useless supplements, insurance for your health, right? I went to doctors. I took drugs I shouldn't have taken. And then, even before I was in this profession, there was that sickening feeling in the pit of your stomach. My gosh, was I an idiot? Nobody likes that. And the more involved people have been in these groups, the harder it is. And I just try to be very, very delicate. Well, I try to be very delicate all the time when I'm dealing with people who are uninitiated. Like the people at this conference, they all came here because they have an idea that things aren't right. They're looking for answers here. But when I'm out with other people and friends, social situations, whatever, I really try to just wait for teachable moments. And when I get one of those, instead of spewing all of this, I'll sometimes say, I'd be happy to give you some things to read about it, and just really gently so that people don't get so defensive. But I understand the defensiveness because I experienced some of it myself.